Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. So, welcome to the forum tonight on the town of Erie ballot questions. First of all, I'd like to recognize that the mayor is here, Justin Brooks.
Hello.
And also Representative Jennifer Parenti, part of the legislature. I don't know if I'm missing anybody else. I hope not. So my name is Peggy Leach, and I'll be your moderator this evening. I'm from the League of Women Voters of Boulder County, and I live in Louisville, where voters approved their home rule charter in 2001. So I'd like to do a couple of thank yous. We've got the library who is letting us be here, and also their technical support. The town of Erie for their logistics, especially getting the panel together. KVNU and the Erie Chamber and anybody else who helped with the publicity. And of course our volunteers. So our agenda tonight is that, we'll have the welcome and we'll have some background and we'll introduce our panel. We're going to take a look at the ballot language, and then we'll watch the presentation from the Charter Commission to the Town Board of Trustees, which was on April 25th. After that, we'll have a Q&A session with our panelists, and we'll wrap up by 7:30. The League of Women Voters of Boulder County is the sponsor of this. There's also a League of Women Voters of Greeley-Weld County. As you all know, Erie is in 2 counties. And of course, these ballot questions affect everybody in Erie, doesn't matter which county you're in. So the League's mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. It's not for women only. It's a political, nonpartisan organization. So nonpartisan means we never support candidates or political parties. But we do take stands on issues based on our positions, which have been developed during the past 103 years through study and consensus. And we provide election information through ballot issue pamphlets or ballot issue forums, such as this evening, candidate forums, vote411.org, where you enter your address and see everything that will be on your ballot. And it has candidate comparisons and ballot issue info. And then the 2023 elections page on our website. LWVBC. We're starting a very busy season right now. We'll have candidate forums all the way through October. So we'll take a look at the ballot language. The first question is 3A. Very simple question. So shall the town of Erie propose home rule charter be adopted? But of course, that will be the main topic of this forum tonight. And then the second question, 3B, is regarding compensation of the mayor and the trustees or council members. It can only be enacted if the first question passes. So basically, if the first question passes, that's the new charter, and then the second question would be an amendment to the charter. So the compensation of the mayor and trustees was last updated in 2011, and this would raise the compensation for the mayor from $500 a month to $1,200 a month, and the trustees or council members from $300 per month to $500 to $700 per month. And then after that, it'll be adjusted annually by the Consumer Price Index. And then the council will no longer need to vote on whether to increase their compensation. So what is home rule? It's a form of government that's based on a locally written charter rather than state statutes. And Colorado allows for statutory or home rule municipalities. Municipalities can't pass laws that conflict with state or federal constitutions. The Colorado legislature handles matters of statewide concern, but home rule municipalities have authority on local matters. And currently, 93% of Colorado residents living in municipalities are under home rule. So the timeline on this whole process, first I'll mention that in 2019, the town board of trustees attempted to initiate home rule, but it was derailed by the pandemic. So then last year, in November of 2022, Erie voters elected a 9-member home rule charter commission to write a charter. So according to state statute, the commission had 6 months to propose a charter to the town board. And they met weekly and presented the charter on April 25th of this year. And that's the presentation that we're going to be watching in a few minutes. Now, in this election, this November, voters will consider adopting the proposed charter. So if it passes, Erie becomes home rule, and the proposed charter will be in effect once the election is certified. If it fails, then according to state statute, the Charter Commission shall come up with a revised charter and ask voters to approve another election. And then if that revised charter fails, the Charter Commission is dissolved. And so then the town can start over or abandon the process. So let's get to our panelists. On my right is Gabby Ray, Director of Communications and Community Engagement for the town of Erie since February 2021. She was one of the staff assigned to help facilitate the Home Rule Commission, and she has a deep knowledge of the Home Rule process because of this project. Then we've got Ashraf Sheikh, who is the chair of the Home Rule Commission for the town of Erie. He is an aerospace engineer, and he spends his free time volunteering locally. He's currently the president of Being Better Neighbors, a local nonprofit. And our third panelist is Bob Brodus, who is another member of the Home Rule Commission. He retired last year from being a director of system development at Avaya. He also spends a lot of time volunteering. I told both of them we'd like them in the League of Women Voters. He serves on Erie's Planning Commission, and he's also in Being Better Neighbors. Okay, almost to get to the video, but I want to talk about our Q&A process first. We have enough people here where we're just going to take written questions, not oral. And so if you would like an index card to write a question on, raise your hand. Great. And so during the presentation, as you come up with a question, write it on your card and then raise your card and somebody will pick it up. And they'll give you another card because we want only one question per card. Then the card will be delivered over to our sorting table over here. And they'll combine things. She's a lot of and they'll combine questions that are similar and that kind of thing. And then I'll receive the funds. All right. So you can write questions anytime in the presentation or even during the Q&A to think of something. Write a question down. We also have people attending on the webinar, and so those people can submit their questions through the Q&A button. And then there will be a volunteer transferring those to index cards, which will be added to the file of in-person flight instructions. All right, I think we're ready to show where the which was at the town board on April 25th.
Can be mic check. So okay. Right. Thank you. We, the people of the town of Erie, Colorado, in order to establish a more effective and responsive government, to promote the general welfare, to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and future generations, do ordain and establish this home rule charter. We recognize that Erie's history, character, and resources require a government that is dedicated to local control, sustainability, and the preservation of our natural environment. We affirm the rights of all residents to participate in the decisions that affect their lives, and we seek to promote transparency, accountability, and good governance at all levels. We pledge to uphold the principles of democracy, equity, and justice, and to foster a community that is inclusive, diverse, and welcoming to all. We value the contributions of our residents, businesses, and institutions, and we seek to promote economic growth and opportunity while preserving the quality of life that makes Erie a desirable place to live. In order to achieve these goals, we adopt this home rule charter as a framework for local governance, and we commit ourselves to its execution for the betterment of our community and the well-being of all who call Erie home. Thank you.
So to move into then a little bit of how we approach this process, we followed a comprehensive step-by-step process in approaching this test. Before we began, we even asked the town staff to include for us a way to solicit and receive public comment outside of cycle throughout the process. So we had a form created on the website for anyone to approach and to send public comment. We also, we didn't want to just be restricted to the single public hearing required by law. And then once we began meeting, we also started by looking at charters from around Colorado, from towns and cities of different sizes and locations who have become home rule recently and as, you know, as many years as many decades ago. This gave us an idea of what worked, what didn't, and the commonalities that we saw in a lot of charters. Once we had a good idea of what other charters looked like, we selected a generic charter and began going through and editing it, reviewing and editing it during our meetings every week. The commission as a whole was very good at doing our homework and doing research, independent research, so that meeting times were definitely more productive discussion of different options rather than everyone trying to learn as we went. And we had a good discussion every meeting of proposals and changes that we wanted to make. We met weekly and we discussed public comments we received over the course of the week and published any draft decisions we made to our website with the help of others. We also held dedicated monthly public comment meetings where attendance was possible both virtually and in person. And each one of the commissioners also reached out individually to gather feedback from their own circles. During meetings, we went over every provision for legal, ideological, and feasibility review. And we also reviewed what we felt like, for what we felt would benefit and support Erie grow as the years go. Every commissioner was actively encouraged to weigh in, so no one's voices were silenced or ignored. And most drafting decisions we made were made with unanimous approval of the commission. There were a few that came down to, that were more contentious, that came down to votes, and we went by a majority vote for those. So the driving principles, aside from the preamble that Ben eloquently read a moment ago, we approached this looking to plan for the long-term future of Erie. We recognize that there's a lot of things going on right this moment that affect Erie, but we didn't want to be overly restrictive in how we wrote the charter so that we're stuck in trying to solve the problems of today, 10, 20 years from now. So we also began by what we felt was important to Erie from our own independent perspectives. What is important as to the residents and to the town of Erie. One of the main ones we came up with that coincided nicely with the trails, natural areas, and community character vote that happened at the same ballot that empowered us. We know that Erie loves and covets its open space. And so we recognized that and we planned for that. We kept that in mind as we went through this process. We focused on providing as much local control as possible and leaving as much as possible up to the residents of Erie. We wanted to provide the guidelines of governance and just kind of leave specifics up to the town elected officials. And we also wanted to make sure town elected officials acted in the best interest of the town and its residents. So moving on to the beginning of our consequential decisions, we started with town governance, and we all decided fairly unanimously to remain the town of Erie rather than the city of Erie. And we'll continue on with a council manager form of government. That's pretty similar to what we have now, where a council does the big picture and the city manager, town manager will administer the day-to-day operations and town staff. We are planning to have 3 districts, 6 council members and the mayor, making up the town council, everyone with 4-year terms. And the town will have 3 districts divided as evenly and as fairly as possible, each with 2 council members, and each council member from each district serving staggered terms, so that every 2 years, every one of our regular elections, every resident of Erie will be able to vote for a town representative. And the mayor will be elected at large, which means by the entire town. And the elections will be held in November of even-numbered years to maximize voter turnout. This was one of the big contentious decisions, especially with aligning with the national federal elections, how partisan rhetoric kind of takes front stage and all of that. But what it came down to at the base of it was we wanted to make sure we had as many people's voices heard. And going back and looking at Erie's historical voter turnout, we're talking about over 70% turnout for our November of even-numbered year elections, whereas we've had, low 30s for some of our April normal municipal elections. So in order to make sure as many people, to make sure our town council was as representative of as much of Erie as possible, we decided to move this to November of even-numbered years. And we hope that that allows most people to have their voices heard and represented on the council. And it also allows us to save money by coordinating elections with county and state elections, and that's just by virtue of moving to November. And as I mentioned previously, one of the other big consequential decisions we made was around open space. So this past November, the TNAC vote passed with 78% of the town voting to extend a tax for the purpose of protecting and acquiring open space. You can see by this little chart that it's only gotten more important to the town percentage-wise as time has gone on. From the initial approval in 2004 of 70% voting to approve, 2012 up to 74%, and 2022 up to 78%. So in order to kind of listen to the voice of Erie, which is so rarely this clear, we've established the Open Space and Trails Advisory Board, which is OSTAB. It currently exists and it cannot be abolished by the council. Now it's going to be required to be in place as as a town board moving forward. We've also required that the town council maintain a fund for the purposes of acquiring, maintaining, and expanding our open space. Similar to this task is currently held by that TNAC fund, but even if since that fund expires at some point, this requires the town to maintain a similar fund once that expires or sunsets. We've also made it harder to politicize independent boards and commissions by making it a little bit harder to remove the members of those boards and commissions. And that's just to make sure that not every single decision that they make becomes an immediate get rid of the members of the board. So to put in some guardrails to good governance as well, we have protected the independence of the municipal court. Currently, there's some interesting ways that the municipal court works, such as the budget is based on the police budget or under subservient to the budget, I think, subservient to the police. So we've kind of independently made it so that the municipal court is required to have an operating budget guaranteed by the town. And We've also protected the municipal judge from retaliatory firings from the council based on if they make decisions that the council doesn't like. We have defined a process for filling vacancies on the council, as this has been something of a contentious point in recent years, as well as a while, further back in our past. So from now on, any filling of vacancies will be a result of a vote from residents, not necessarily a new vote, but as a result of a vote. We're requiring the town to maintain transparency requirements, even if CORA is repealed at the state level. Because as we said earlier, transparency is an important part of, the residents having confidence in their town governance. And in that same vein, we're requiring that the town conduct and make public a yearly audit of town finances. I believe the town is already doing that, but this is just making it a requirement that it should continue to do that. And we also are requiring that the town maintain a code of ethics with enforcement mechanisms for violations of its provisions, as well as for violations of this charter. So we wanted to make sure any actual consequences had teeth. Continuing along on guardrails, the big one that we decided to keep on was that even if Tabor is repealed at the state level, the town will still require a new vote of residents to increase or levy additional taxes. Currently, we heard a lot going into this process about how home rule would be used to create new taxes that would, harm all of us. And while Tabor prevents that from happening even at our town level, even under home rule, we wanted to make sure that even if Tabor goes away, that still cannot happen. And I wanted to emphasize that the charter does not, in its provisions, include any new taxes. So, we're also requiring that the town government maintain ordinances, or we want the town to maintain ordinances in increasing the requirements around campaign finance reporting. There's a couple of bills already working through the state legislature that might help in this regard. But if those don't make it through, then the town will be required to keep additional, increase the requirements around campaign finance reporting to increase our transparency. And we've also made it, sorry, I guess I was reading off of my other notes, but yeah, this is the part of protecting the independent boards and commissions, protecting them from political pressure, just from making decisions that the town, the council doesn't like. And we have term limits for the elected officials, with 2 consecutive terms in the same office being the limit. And finally, we required the council to maintain strict review criteria around Title 32 special districts. There's a lot of issues going around statewide, around metro districts in particular. And this will require the town to make sure that any special districts coming before the council in the future would have to have provisions that take into account the representation of the residents who live in those districts, since that seems to be one of the largest points of friction around these districts. All right, moving on to local control. We wanted to make sure that the town has all the rights of local control afforded to it by the state of Colorado Constitution. And currently, this will allow the town to exempt itself from any statewide provisions, statewide statutes that on matters of local and municipal control, bypassing local ordinances. So it doesn't automatically mean we have every power, but if we so choose to take that power, we pass an ordinance around that, and then we'd be able to govern ourselves in these local matters. And then we also allow the town to set ordinance penalties and fines beyond the maximum currently set in state statute. And that's mainly just because some of the statutory limits for fairly large violations of public safety are very low. So this allows the town to levy larger fines than those. And to leave things to the residents as much as possible, we are requiring that all new taxes will go to a resident vote to implement, which again, with Tabor in place is already a requirement, but it will continue to be the requirement even if that goes away. And filling vacancies in the council will always be a result of the resident vote. So we've created kind of a tiered method where if it's close enough to the previous election, the next runner-up will be automatically appointed. But if it's closer to an upcoming election, we'll just leave that position open until the next election can take place. And if there's somewhere in the middle, the period in the middle of those 2 years, it will go to a special election. So there will be no, it's always going to be left up to residents to choose their representatives. And then we also want to make sure we maintain the accessible rights to initiative, referendum, and recall based on the number of votes cast for the possession being recalled. Since we're growing so fast, we figured the best metric was to just however many people voted for a position, base all the requirement, the percentage of votes required for all of those initiative, referendum, and recall votes to be based on that number. And then one more thing on leaving it to the residents, we on the commission couldn't decide on the best way to handle council pay. We know it's kind of a political hot potato. No one wants to be seen increasing their own pay or voting for increased pay. So as we've written into the charter, but first of all, I want to say current pay was pretty much unanimously agreed is very low for the amount of time worked that you all do. We've met with you independently and in a study session to get an idea on what you do for this town. And we all unanimously agree that you guys are paid too little for what you do. But setting pay by ordinance, which you currently have the power to do, you haven't done, I don't remember the last time that the council has set their own pay. It's not politically easy to do for various reasons. And so we settled on leaving it up to the residents. For this measure, we are leaving in the charter the current method of setting pay, which means set by ordinance by the council, and anytime pay is increased, it's not going to be put into place until those who voted for it are reelected or leave office. So it doesn't come into effect until after those who voted for it. And we are presenting a ballot question alongside this charter in the coming November election, where the pay will be set at a hard number. I believe we set at $1,200 for the mayor and $700 for the councilors. And then it'll be increased yearly on January using the CPI, that's the consumer price index, thank you, which is an area-wide price. It's a catch-all kind of metric for how the area is doing. And so that it rolls in things like inflation and median pay and all of that stuff. So yearly that pay would increase in January, but it would remove from the council the right to set their own pay. So it would become a hard number, increasing yearly, but the council would not be able to change their own pay. And so that kind of takes it out of the council's hands. There's no more political issue. And so that'll be presented as a ballot question as an immediate amendment to the charter alongside the charter in November. So to assist in kind of moving us from statutory Erie to home rule Erie, we also wrote a transition section. And so most of this section lays out pretty much that as things are done now, the laws and ordinances we have now, the boards and commissions we have now will carry over. And then the major changes though that, or kind of the way we handle this transition is that the provisions of the charter will become effective on the date of certification of the election approving it. So whenever, if this November, the residents of Erie vote to approve the charter, it'll become effective as soon as that election is certified. And then districts will have to be drawn by an independent commission in preparation for the November 2024 election. And so one of the big tasks for this council will be to facilitate that process and ensure that the districting happens. And based on how we've written it in the charter, the districting will have to be conducted by an independent third party to avoid any conflicts. And we've also done our best to ensure that the process is not political, not politicized, and free from gerrymandering. And this means that in 1 year after the passage of this charter, the town will elect an entirely new council in November 2024. And so that was another one of the big decisions we had a lot of kind of back and forth on, as far as how do we handle the transition for the currently sitting council members, because we're moving from April to November cycles. So the current trustees, we have 5 of you whose terms would have been up in this coming April, correct? Or sorry, next April. And so rather than try to perform a special election immediately, we decided that the terms for the 5 who would be expiring in April will be extended till November, until we can have a new election at our new regular election time. And then the 2 whose terms would have gone till 2026 will be cut short. There were major trade-offs and discussions around both of these. But the options as we saw them, we kind of weighed the pros and cons, and we felt like that was the better process as a whole. So in terms of the options we looked at, we had one option where we would continue to continue those 2 council members until the 2026 election, and they would remain seated, and they would either be assigned to a district or would serve at large. And that would help in that it would allow us to maintain some incumbent trustees, now council members, to help that transition. So it wouldn't be an entirely brand new council, just learning the ropes for the first time. But the cons to that would have been kind of a complicated and extended transition period that would move into 2026, because it would require us to have a kind of not a special election, but a unique election for one time only, where we would only elect 1 council member each, and then potentially 1 at-large council member if the 2 existing ones were assigned at large, or if we would just have a one-off for a 2-year term or something. So we felt that complexity in the election would be a large negative for residents of the town. And the other option we looked at was just ending everyone's terms and moving to a clean break into home rule Erie. And we understand that that's not fair to 2 of the representatives who were duly elected at our last election. But it made it so that our transition to home rule was quick and easy, single cycle, we're done, we're now home rule, and we can move on to governing in our steady state. And the cons to that would have been that if none of the currently sitting council trustees run for re-election or are re-elected, we may end up with an entirely new council, which would require some extended onboarding period. But we felt like that's happened even in our regular elections before, where we've had a completely new council, and at most we've heard an onboarding can go, several months, 6 to 8 months. And so it was worth that short-term risk to make sure we had that clean break and a quick and simple transition to home rule. And so ultimately, I think it was a 5-4 vote by the council, we chose option 2 to do the clean break.
Yes, we're done. Seemed like it ended in the middle of the sentence. I have several questions here, and I'll just ask our panelists to pass the mic between themselves. I think we need to turn it on first. And they can figure out who wants to answer which one. So I just happen to have one on top here. Does home rule give the town eminent domain powers? Are these powers limited by state law
Can you
or?
speak up, please?
And, does home rule give the town eminent domain powers? And are these powers limited by state law or mentioned in the charter?
Right, so the answer is yes, there is eminent domain powers. It's section 15.03 of the charter. I'll just read it to you. So the town shall have the right of eminent domain for all municipal purposes, either within or without the limits of the town, in accordance with Title 38, Article 1 of the Colorado Revised Statutes as amended. And this is very standard among home rule charters. So we looked at probably 15 to 20 different charters as part of this process. And this is really how eminent domain is worded in the vast majority of them.
All right, and I have a correction. Somebody wrote $1,200 per year seems low. And so I may have said it wrong. It's $1,200 per month for the mayor in question 3B. And 700 a month for council. All right, if Erie voters reject the proposed charter, how will the charter commission figure out what the voters liked and did not like about the charter, so the commission can present a more acceptable charter in a subsequent election?
I think that we would try to do more of what we did with outreach and figuring out what, which parts of the charters were the most. Which part of the charters were the sticking points that caused most people to vote. And of course, we have Gabby here to help with a little bit of outreach as she did the first time through the process.
If I may for just a second, I'm Gabby Ray and I helped with the engagement. So with the website and social media and all that kind of stuff. And I will just say, I've been in local government for more than a decade now. And this commission was probably the best representation of democracy and civic engagement that I've ever seen. I was very impressed with the 9 of them. It made me really proud to be a part of the project. So thank you. And it was still incredibly difficult to get people to come out and talk about a charter and talk about really in-depth detailed things that matter to our community. And so if it doesn't pass and we have to do this again, I highly encourage you all to be a part of every single one of those engagement meetings. They opened up all of their meetings every week for months, and we had just a couple people show up. So I really encourage people to show up if we have to do this again.
In addition to the charter meetings themselves, several of us held meetings locally throughout places, like some of the parks in Erie and things like that. And again, we often did not have people show up. I'd also like to recognize Commissioner Campbell, who is in the audience.
All right, I have 2 questions that I'm supposed to read together. Does home rule give the town the power to raise sales tax 4 times faster than the state without a town vote? And there's a 12.01 power to tax. The town must have voter approval in advance for the following, and then except for refinancing bonded debt at a lower interest rate or adding new employees to existing town pension plans, creation of any multiple fiscal year direct or indirect debt whatsoever without adequate present cash reserves pledged irrevocably and held for payments in all future fiscal years. All right, and the other question says, the charter states citizens must vote yes if taxes are to be raised, except 12.012. Can you explain what this 2 is? And that was what I was just reading, the exception.
So at least as far as the exception goes, it basically means if there's an
Can you
opportunity.
speak up, please?
Yes, this is better.
Hardly hear it.
Is it only on in this one room or?
It may be more sensitive.
I'll try to speak up at least for the next few questions, but
Thank you.
as far as that exception goes, basically it gives us an out to refinance debt to a lower rate, and cheaper than it would have been otherwise. But other than that, we still need voter approval for any sort of tax increase. The only thing we can do is any bond that we have, that we hold, and we want to refinance it lower, that can be done without a voter approval.
And the first question about raising sales tax, I'm not sure where that information came from, but it's not accurate.
All right, sure. All right, I'll use this one. I think that'll be a little better. Okay, we have a question. If a whole new council will be elected in 2024, how will it be staggered ongoing as mentioned earlier?
So to keep the staggering for the first election in November of 2024, for each of the districts that elect 2 councilors, the one with the higher number of votes would have 4-year terms, and the next runner-up with the next most number of votes would have a 2-year term that would then be up in the next 2026 election.
Next question, who will draw the council district lines? And how will you ensure the lines are fair?
Okay, so typically what happens through this is an independent commission is formed or a consultant is hired, and that is their job. And so there are things that are written in as far as they all have to be within 10%, if I remember. I can double check it, but in size and no gerrymandering, so they all have to be contiguous districts. And then that gets recommended to the Board of Trustees, or if this passes, the town council, who would then approve the recommendation, or if they feel they need to change it, which is almost never done.
Okay, I have some questions here about emergency powers. Section 4.06, 6.03, and 6.04. So what protections, civil rights, human rights, constitutional rights does this charter provide for citizens that may disagree with the emergency powers and disobey because these citizens believe the emergency powers are circumventing the rule of law? And then citizens will have no input in declaring an emergency or in setting parameters around emergency ordinances. Why are we prevented from the same public comment process established for other ordinances? Is this legal? And what are the maximum fines and imprisonment months or years the town can impose by ordinance?
So this was another one of those hot button issues that we did get some feedback on during the process. And one of the things that wasn't immediately clear to me until I went into the process and talked to the lawyers involved with like state lawmaking is that emergency powers are by necessity limited in time. They're not meant to apply for forever. So the way that it's written in the charter here, any emergency declaration and emergency proclamation or that the council puts in place is only in effect until the council can convene for a meeting and ratify that using the normal process. So in order to have some emergency that a majority of the council agrees is an emergency, the maximum cycle of any emergency declaration would only be until the next regular meeting. Until it's safe for the council to meet again. So there's not any real worry that, a rogue mayor will declare an emergency and say, I'm gonna drain the coffers and take all the town money or anything like that. It can't, by just definition of what emergency powers are in the state of Colorado, that can't happen. And we've written it so that it will stay in effect until the council can meet and ratify or reject that emergency. Punishment. So we do have, there's no punishments built into the charter itself, but we are requiring the council adopt an ethics set, like a code of ethics that would allow punishment for things like abuse of power. So it's not in the charter, but it's meant to be formed and have a punishment for things like that.
Yeah, so one of the things we really wanted to make sure we were doing was setting frameworks. And for things like specific terms, those will be set by ordinance rather than by us, because things will change over time. We wanted this charter to be something that would last for 50, 100 years, whatever. Obviously, you can make amendments to it like we're doing with the pay, where you put to the town to say what they want. But we are not setting things in the charter, like, all right, if you do this crime, you'll serve this much time.
All right, I can answer this one. Who are the 9 members of the charter? Who chose them? Were there more than 9 who volunteered? Okay, so last year in November of 2022, there were 18 people that ran for the Charter Commission and 9 were elected. And I can read the names. Ashwa Sheikh, Sarah Cornely, Chelsea Campbell, Brian O'Connor, Lisa Cunningham, Bob Rodas, Adam Haid, Candace Whitehouse, and Ben Hemphill. So 2 of those members are with us, and there's another one, at least one more in the audience. How were Charter Commission meetings advertised? I never received any notice.
That's a neat question. So we advertise these just as we do any other meeting of the board. There's multiple ways that we did this. So many of them are digital, some of them are not. The ones that are not, some of them are here in the audience today. We have newspapers that these are advertised within. We also put them on our town calendar, which is on the homepage of our website. So that's always there. We used all of our social media channels every time that there was a meeting, and all of them were there. That includes Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, which is now X, and a whole bunch of others. And we did go to many different locations and put the information physically in pamphlets there. So that includes the BCC. We had a couple here. We had them at multiple coffee shops, at the chamber. So it was in many places. And if you don't follow any of those, I highly suggest you do. We send a lot of really important information out through those. And if you just want to follow the news, they also publish nearly every one of them for us. So thank you for that. Let me know if there's other ideas you have. I'd love to hear them.
There's something in Erie edition or whatever the thing that comes out.
Oh yes, and your utility bill, the Erie edition is also in there almost every month. Yeah.
Okay. Does the charter establish a minimum percentage for residential representation on metro district boards?
As Bob mentioned last time, we didn't put like specific numbers where we could avoid it, but we basically are ordering the future council that they have to make sure that residents are reasonably represented on metro district, on any special district governance. So no, there's no specific percentage, but the order to the council going down the line is to adopt ordinances that make sure resident interests are protected.
So, and the state is also looking into this, which would supersede anyway what we do.
Currently, each Erie voter gets to vote to elect a majority of Erie's governing body every election. 4 out of 7 elected officials. Why did the Charter Commission change the structure so that Erie voters only get to vote for 1 council member every election, plus the mayor every other election?
All right, so the question was misworded a little bit. So you always vote for the mayor every 4 years. So, well, actually, now I understand what they're saying. So yeah, you vote for the mayor every 4 years. And just like with the state house and with Congress, you vote for your local representative. So you have more local power to have your representatives. And so the representatives have to be from the district. And so it ensures that the representation on the council is more equally divided within the town of Erie. Hopefully that answered the question.
And yeah, that was another one of those contentious issues that we spent a lot of time discussing. But what it came down to is we wanted to make sure, like, we see a future where all of the representatives on the council can come from, you know, a few select neighborhoods throughout the town. So we wanted to make sure that as many, like, every area of town was represented. And we figured a small number of districts was the best way to ensure that equal representation.
And one thing I would note is we did record and post every single one of their meetings on their website, which is erieco.gov/charter commission. And you can watch every single one of them, and they're labeled by the topics they went over. So if one of these in particular is really catching your eye and you want to know how they came to this decision, you can watch that specific meeting. And then Ash did a great job of giving me a rundown of their high-level decisions each week. And so those are also just written. So if you don't want to watch the whole meeting, you can just see a note that's at the top of the page. So I really highly suggest going through that and finding the items that you're interested in. They had some really deep discussion about all of them.
Sounds like great information. How are you driving awareness of this vote election in this odd year cycle?
I'll start, and I'll pass it along. Unfortunately, there is a state law that says the town cannot put any fiscal resources behind its own ballot measures. So we can't host events like this. So it's very helpful when organizations like the League of Women Voters set something like this up for us. So we can't do any campaigning as the town or any of our town representatives, but we can push out facts and we can answer questions. So we highly suggest you ask us questions and we will answer those for you. We can keep out all the information that already exists. So we have two different websites, the one just for the Charter Commission and their proposed charter. We have another one that's all about home rule and the process and what it means and how it might impact your lives. All of that does exist right there. But we can't put any more resources and funding towards any campaigning. So it is kind of up to others to help us spread the word.
Right now, the state collects Erie's sales and use taxes and then later pays Erie. How long is the delay for Erie to collect the sales and use taxes?
You want to do it? Since you... No. Yeah, it's funny because that was one of the questions that we were sort of expecting, and I know Gabby did some research as to what it has to be. So it's typically, I think you said 60 days till we get the resources, till we get the tax money. Property tax does go to the county, and we get it from the counties. So whether you're in Weld or Erie County, I'm sorry, Boulder County, and yeah.
Yeah, I'll say if we did bring it in-house for the town to administer our own sales tax collection, it may cut off half of that time. So from 60 days to roughly 30 days, businesses have 30 days past the end of the month to submit their sales taxes. And the state has another 30 days to get it to the municipalities. So it would cut off about a month. We don't have to do that. The charter doesn't require that as it's proposed, but the council could then determine that and vote on that decision going forward. They cannot make that decision under statutory rule. So it's something we can't do right now, but could under home rule. The only other potential benefit to that is if a municipality decides to bring sales tax collection in-house, it is quite often that they end up collecting more money because they're more able to go out and clean up any errors in their businesses. So currently we do have some businesses that are paying sales tax to the wrong municipality. And the process to go through the state and get that corrected and fixed is very long and arduous. But if we bring it in-house, we can clean those up in theory much faster. And then most municipalities do end up collecting a little bit more sales tax because of that.
I have a few questions here about, well, what are some benefits? What is the reason to vote for home rule? What are some reasons to vote against and all of those? And that's really not what this forum is. We're just providing information. And so we're not really providing the pros and cons of these. Right. I don't know, I might be out of questions. Would that be true? Okay, Pat has one.
So probably you could talk about home rule, we've got plenty of time.
Talk about home rule. I mean, we did kind of talk about home rule and what it is. And like there's a question here, what data do you have that provides a clear picture or case regarding benefits of home rule versus without home rule? Current declared benefits are subjective. All right, so, I mean, I don't know that we can really address that other than, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there is something on a presentation from the Colorado Municipal League. So we are limited to only giving factual information about the charter. We're not allowed to give our opinions by statute. But there are pros and cons listed by the Municipal League. And so you can look those up on the web. If you have any questions about, or you can't find the link, my email is rbraudes@erieco.gov, and I can send you the link out.
And your contact.
RBRAUDES@erieco.gov.
Yeah.
And I do have my business cards here. I'll pass out to some, and I can get you in contact with anybody as well.
All right, I have a note from Celeste, although I think Bob might have said this, the Colorado Municipal League has some pros and cons on their website and in their 2022 handbook. Now, the Colorado Municipal League is generally in favor of home rule. All right, sorry.
Sorry, I remember what I was gonna say. So one of the things that Gabby mentioned was that if you look up some of our meetings where we discussed it, we go through all of the pros and cons of basically every decision we made. And that is a good reference if there's a specific one you're trying to decide on or find more information on. It says the pros and cons in either direction.
Okay, and I missed a question here. No, I think I did do this one, Celeste, about the staggered terms. We did do that one. So do we have any more questions?
So the answer to the staggered terms was the higher vote getter gets the 4-year term. Okay, I didn't hear it, I'm sorry. And neither did my partner here.
We also have some statistics on, for all the counties around us, for municipalities, what are their sizes and whether or not they've gone to home rule. Just statistically, Erie is larger than the next 2 largest municipalities that are not home rule. Combined, sorry. Yes, combined. And so I go through each county, and again, if you want to send me a link or an email, I will send you the link or just send you the information.
All right, I hear I have more questions coming. I have a note that Yellowstone Magazine has done pretty extensive coverage on this too, if anybody wants to check that out. Right. So now, when we do finish with questions, I'm going to encourage people to stick around and chat and get refreshments. And also sign in on our sign-in sheet, just so we know who all is here. We need to be out by 8 o'clock, so we've got plenty of time. And I hear there's some more questions coming, so we're not quite ready to start mingling yet, but, we do encourage people to do that, answer them.
I will say too, I said, we can answer your questions, we can't campaign, and so if you had questions to ask after this, we do have eriecode.gov/home rule. There's a whole Q&A section in there. You can submit a question and it'll come right to me. I'll work with the Charter Commission members to get answers sent back. And all of the questions and answers are posted publicly, so you can see other people's questions. The questions we've been collecting, we've started collecting those back in 2021 when we started this process. So you can see the questions from the very beginning before we elected a commission, and then you can ask new ones that you may have now that the proposed charter is out there. So again, it's eriecode.gov/home rule, and it'll take you there. You can ask any questions after tonight that you might have.
Does anybody need another card for another question?
Okay, so this is another question about maximum fines, but I think you said it's not in the charter. What is the maximum fine for breaking an ordinance? $1,000, $2,000, $10,000, or is there no maximum?
So there's no limit set in the charter. There are state limits which apply once you get into ridiculous territory. The only thing that we preserve in the charter is the ability for the council to set fines, so reasonable fines that are higher than the statutory limits currently set that apply to us now. So there's no limit listed in the charter. That does not mean that fines can be unlimited.
And I'll just say that right now, there are fines associated with breaking ordinance. They are all different. Each ordinance is a little bit unique, and that is mostly, as of right now, entirely based on state statute and what ordinances are required to have as fines. So if you've ever been given a citation, you may know what some of those fines are. But as Ash is saying, there's a minimum required by state that we have to keep. The state still has overarching power, even if we're home rule. But this does give us the option, the town council, the option to increase fines up to, again, certain really high limits that the state also sets.
If Erie collects their own taxes, that means hiring more Erie employees that the state is now providing by collecting the taxes. I see this as a cost not needed to the town.
So if the town's gonna have to do a study to determine whether or not it'll be more cost effective to continue to go through the state and pay the state. It's not free to have the state collect their taxes. So we pay them to do it. So what we would have to do is look at, is there extra capacity in existing staff, or do we have to hire new staff? And to balance the costs of doing that against the revenue increase. And as Gabby said, who do you think would look out more for the needs of the town as to whether or not people are paying their fair share? Would it be the state or would it be the town?
Gabby, would you say a little bit more about that? Because in the email you sent to me, you said some of the things that about looking out for the town.
From a collecting tax perspective, yeah, so if we do start collecting our own sales taxes at the town, we probably would need a couple more employees. That is another set of things we would have to do that we don't currently do. And like I mentioned earlier, we do think we would collect more in sales tax that would probably offset the cost of those employees, just based on the fact that we don't currently have a good mechanism for clearing up discrepancies and errors in tax collection now that the state does. It's a very complicated, convoluted system to go through the state to get errors corrected. And most municipalities that have gone home rule and decided to collect their own sales taxes have seen an increase in revenues coming in just because of that. It may or may not happen that way in Erie, but we anticipate it would, just because we know of some errors right now. And so it is something the town council could decide, if the charter is passed, they could decide to move that in-house, and yes, we probably would need a couple more employees.
Will we adopt ranked choice voting?
It says in the charter that the method of voting is up to ordinance, so it doesn't preclude it. It leaves the option open in the future to use ranked choice voting if that becomes supported at the state level, because there are ways. There's a few bills that are in process of being implemented, which allow coordinated ranked choice voting elections with counties. And that is one of the options that we looked at. Did we want to mandate ranked choice voting? And we didn't want to, because currently it would be an additional cost to the town, because the counties do not have to support it. But we left the wording was intentionally left open to allow that to happen in future elections if the town council decides to declare an election. Oh, sorry, ranked choice voting is a method of voting that is called ranked choice.
RANK.
Yes, it's a catch-all term that's used to describe a method of voting where usually people vote they rank their choices by preference. And then if, for example, there's a whole bunch of different ways to describe it, and we could do a whole 2-hour seminar on different methods of ranked choice voting. But it's essentially known as, right here.
We have single winner and multi-winner. Those are league pamphlets,
Right.
and they're more on the table.
And to answer the question, no, we don't have to do it. Yes, we have the option to do it down.
Yeah. This is another area where I encourage people to look at the deliberations, because we spent a fair amount of time talking about this, and it really came down to the fact that the counties currently, as Ash pointed out, do not support it in their voting. And so we would have to pay the counties to do something specific for us that would be pretty expensive to do today.
If I really don't like one section of the charter, should I vote no and try to get it better in the revised charter?
I can't tell you how to vote, but to clarify the process, if the charter is voted no, then we, as the Charter Commission, will go back to the drawing board. We'll continue from the version we have, of course, and look for further feedback. But the charter is not set in stone. It's a living document. It has processes built into it to amend it. And that even amendments to the charter can be done by voter initiative. So it doesn't necessarily mean, like, if you like most of the charter and you hate this one line or one section, you can vote no and hope it gets fixed later, or you can vote yes and hope it gets fixed later.
And there is a section, Article 7, that talks about initiative recall, referendum and recall. And so those are really ways that you can, as a citizen, make proposals, and you get a certain number of signatures, and it would be on the next ballot.
I'm not quite sure I understand this question, but I think it might be talking about a social media site. So it says, what is the social name for all home rule information?
If you're talking about social media, we put it out on the town of Erie's pages, so that's at Erie, Colorado, on almost all of them. You will have to use the search functionality, because it's been a while since we put some new information out. Just as soon as the ballot language is accepted, I have to stop campaigning. And so you'll have to search, but it is out there. I do highly suggest the websites, though. That is where probably the best information and the most solid information is going to live. And as I mentioned, there are 2 of them. And yeah, I see a note that somebody couldn't use the website. I shortened the links on purpose, so it would be a little easier, and I can make sure I get it all to you very quickly. But there are 2 websites. One that's just home rule general high level information, how we got here. That's where you can ask your questions. And one that is for the Charter Commission with all of their meetings, all of their notes, everything, the proposed charter. So there are 2 different sites. I just wanted to make that clear as well.
And what are the addresses for those? There's a note here that says erieco.gov/home rule does not work.
Well, it
It
should.
does work, it does work.
Okay,
Okay.
it should, because I just tried it. So erieco.gov/home rule is the site that discusses home rule at a high level, and you can add your questions there. erieco.gov/charter commission is the webpage that has all the charter information. So there are two for legal reasons. I separated them. So that's a little complicated, but they do exist. Please let me know if you have trouble. I have cards up here.
All right, how do we change the charter in the future? Only through voter approval, only in
And
even years?
It's the end of our decision, our major transition. So we wouldn't have been as organized as we were without her help. So I think I just recently answered that, but yeah, there are multiple ways, but everything, any change to the charter would have to go to voter approval before it could be adopted. And the way that something would get on the charter or get on the ballot for a charter amendment, it could either be by voter initiative, Erie, Colorado resident initiative, or the town council could propose an amendment and have it on a ballot, which would then have to go to voter approval before it could be added to the charter or amend the charter.
If voted no, how long before Erie can try home rule again?
Well, we have a year, so, well, actually 6 months. So if it's voted no, the commission is still in force. And it'll be again on the next year's ballot. So right now it's on the 23 ballot. With voted no, it'll be a revision of it, will be on the 24 ballot.
And then after that, I actually don't know how long we have to wait. So if it gets voted no this year, and it gets voted no again next year, I think there's a certain number of years we have to wait. I think it's at least 2 years that we have to wait until we would try again. But it could, in theory, come up again in another few years.
All right, do we have any more questions? Okay, well,
Had one that wasn't answered.
what was it?
It was about whether there's gonna be a blue book sent.
Oh, I think I did see that. Okay, yes, I did see that, and somehow I got it in the wrong file or something. She asked if there was gonna be a blue book on this, and I believe there is not, because it's not a financial. Go ahead.
I thought something was just printed.
Yeah, so it should be in your blue book from your county. It will just have the language of the ballot question. So it's literally just yes or no. And so you have to go into the website to actually read the proposed charter. Because all the blue book is gonna have is just, do you approve the charter? And then the second question about the finances. So you'll still need the website.
All right, so, I'd like to, oops, here comes another question.
But we're running out.
Won't Erie run out of open space to buy? Why require buying open space in the charter?
So the buying and maintaining of open space, and I know the language for maintaining is not in the charter. But it's implied in that when you have open space, you need to maintain it. And again, we didn't want to be overly restricted that the money would only be used for maintaining. But essentially the purpose of this was to make sure that, one of the few largest instances of, bipartisan support that we've seen in Erie has been around open space. And so we just wanted to make sure that that element was protected in the charters.
Is the final proposed home rule charter on the website? I think that's what it is.
I'm gonna be the light for you. So, oh, that's not what I'm seeing. How do I see that? I don't know how this happened. the website, I would show you if it was.
There it is.
Oh, there we go. So this is the website that was erieco.gov/charter commission. And the proposed charter is right here in this bullet point. So you can see the full presentation, which we just watched tonight, the YouTube presentation. So that's the first link. The proposed charter in its entirety as a PDF is here. You can see their resolution if you wanted to. All the public comments that came in during their whole process is listed here. And then right underneath this is those meeting summaries that I mentioned that Ashton helped me put together. So you can see a summary of every single one of the meetings that they did. And then the next thing is their members. You can email each of them individually if you really like to. And then at the very bottom, if we go a little bit farther, you can see the entire playlist of all of their meetings and watch them right here on this page. So it kind of all lives together on that one page.
Fair warning, it's like 3 hours every week from December to April. Minimum 3 hours, sorry.
I don't know if everyone heard that, 3 hours per week. So,
Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah.
Yes, we really would like to thank the panelists tonight and, the audience, thank you for attending. Elections are our chance to stand up for what matters most to us. Thank you for being an informed voter. The recording of this will be available on our website, LWVBC.org. Then click on the news tab and then social media. We'll also have a link on our 2023 election page. Check out vote411.org for information on your ballot, and that will go live on October 9th. So don't try it before then because there's nothing there yet. The election is November 7th. Ballots will start being mailed out on October 16th, so 2 weeks from today. And so now we'll adjourn and feel free to mingle. Just remember that we need to clean up the ballot by 8 and we're very close.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you.